Most betrayals don't begin with one big mistake. They begin with emotional absence. In this story, a woman realizes her husband never truly disappeared because of work, he disappeared from her. While she raised their son alone and supported his dreams, her husband was giving love, attention, and tenderness to another family. The terrifying part? The signs were always there, she just never connected them. This story will make you question how well we really know the people closest to us.
It all felt like a movie, a terrible one, happening in slow motion. That Saturday, my best friend Olivia practically dragged me to a charity gala at the Field Museum. She insisted I needed a night out. My son, Alex, who is 18, had been glued to the piano, endlessly practicing for his Juilliard audition, and the stress was thick enough to cut with a knife. I thought, fine, one night tit away can't hurt. I never could have imagined that a simple fundraiser would detonate my entire life. We were near the silent auction tables when Olivia pulled me aside, wanting to bid on a trip to Tuscany. It was then I saw him out of the corner of my eye, and my blood ran cold. The man was my husband. Julian Thorne was wearing the vintage Patek Philippe watch I'd saved for years to buy him for our anniversary. It was one of a kind. He was holding a small boy, no older than 5, who had his arms slung around Julian's neck, giggling with pure joy. My first thought was, isn't he supposed to be in Tokyo closing a software deal? My second thought died before it was born, because the little boy spoke and answered everything. Daddy, can we get the big dinosaur skeleton? The boy pointed to a prize replica in a display case, his voice ringing out in the quiet hall. Daddy, he called him Daddy. A low hum stuttered in my ears, drowning everything else out. Olivia was still tapping away on her phone, trying to place her bid online. I stumbled back against a velvet rope, and that's when she finally looked up. Amelia, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I couldn't speak. My eyes were glued to them. Julian set the boy down, knelt, and fixed his tiny bow tie, smiling with a warmth I hadn't felt from him in 20 years of marriage. And standing right there beside him, with a hand possessively on his arm, was a woman in a stunning emerald green gown. I knew her, Sophia Rossi, Julian S. executive assistant. 3 years ago, I had dropped by his office on our anniversary. Sophia was the one who brought me a bottle of water, smiling and saying, "Mrs. Thorne, so good to see you." Back then, she wore a simple grey dress, her hair in a tight bun, nothing like the polished, confident woman who stood there now. Olivia followed my gaze and her mouth fell open. "Is that Julian?" I didn't say a word. My hands were trembling, but somehow I managed to pull my phone from my clutch. I lined up the shot. Julian was lifting the boy up to see an exhibit. Sophia followed, handing the child a little bag of gourmet chocolates she'd bought from a vendor. The boy beamed, turning to shout, "Thank you, Daddy. You're the greatest!" Julian leaned and kissed his hair. Click. I took the photo. And another, and one more. They walked over to a dessert station. Julian held the boy's hand with one hand and Sophia's with the other. They looked like a picture-perfect family. The boy got a smudge of chocolate on his cheek, and Julian took a lint napkin from the table and gently wiped it away. That tiny, fatherly gesture. He'd never once done anything like that for our son, Alex. When Alex was 5, he was so sick with pneumonia. I'd called Julian, crying, begging him to come home from a conference, but he said the final keynote was too important to miss. When our son won his first national piano competition at age 9, I texted him the video. His only reply was, "Nice work." Now Alex was 18, and for all those years, I'd attended every recital alone, every parent-teacher conference alone. I gave that man a son, raised him for 18 years, and he never once stopped to wipe chocolate from his face. Olivia grabbed my arm, her voice a terrified whisper. "Amelia, talk to me. Please say something." I lowered my phone, turned my back to them, and took one long, shuddering breath. "We're leaving." Olivia was stunned. "That's it? You're not going to march over there and tear her extensions out?" I just repeated, "We're leaving." I grabbed her by the wrist and walked straight for the exit without looking back. It wasn't until I was in her Lexus and had pulled the door shut that I saw my palms were bleeding. crescent moons dug in by my own fingernails. Olivia started the car, her eyes on me in the rearview mirror, but she said nothing. I pulled up the photo on my phone and zoomed in. The boy was beautiful, with Julian's same dark, intense eyes. A carbon copy. He looked to be about 5, maybe 6. That meant Julian and Sophia had been together for at least 6 or 7 years. 6 or 7 years. While I was putting my own architecture firm on hold to help him launch his software company, Nexus Dynamics. I worked so hard designing his first corporate headquarters that I ended up in the hospital with a bleeding ulcer for a month. All that time, our son was in grade school, asking me every single night when Daddy would be home. And I'd lie, telling him his father was building a future for us and would be home soon. What an absolute fool I was. I leaned my head against the cold glass and started to laugh. I laughed until tears streamed down my cheeks. Olivia tossed a pack of tissues into the back seat. "Amelia Thorne, you stop that right now. If you have to cry, cry, but please stop laughing. Seriously, that laugh is freaking me out." I ignored the tissues, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. My voice was chillingly steady. It almost scared me. "Olivia, take me to a lawyer's office. It's Saturday night. We'll go on Monday." "Monday's too late," I said. "We're going now." Olivia bit her lip, silent for a few beats, then she wrenched the steering wheel to the side. The car made an illegal U-turn and shot off towards downtown Chicago. On the way, I dialed Alex's number. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Mom?" His voice was rough with exhaustion. He'd clearly been practicing. Hearing him, a knot tightened in my chest. It took me a second to find my voice. "Sweetheart, I need to ask you something." "Okay, what is it?" I clutched my phone tighter. If your father and I decided to get divorced, who would you want to live with?" The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, stretching on for an eternity. When Alex finally spoke, his voice was deeper, graver than before. "Mom, what did he do? Don't ask questions. Just answer me." There was no hesitation. "You." The word was a bullet, swift and certain. Then he repeated it. "Mom, whatever is happening, I'm with you." I squeezed my eyes shut as silent tears finally fell. "Okay, honey. Mom knows. Get some rest. Don't stay up too late." "Mom." I ended the call and put the phone face down. Olivia's car was now parked in front of a sleek glass skyscraper. She left the car running, but turned in her seat to face me. "Attorney Marcus Cole. He was my brother's roommate in law school. I just called him. He came back to the office. He's waiting for us on the 40th floor." "Thank you." Olivia. "Don't thank me," she said, her voice thick as she looked away. "I'm going up with you." Mr. Cole was in his 40s with shrewd eyes and an impeccably tailored suit. He handed me a glass of water and slid a standard divorce agreement across the vast mahogany desk. "Mrs. Thorne, please review this. Tell me what amendments you want to make." I began to read through the document. Division of property, transfer of stocks, custody agreements. Each clause felt like a fresh wound, but I forced myself to read on. "All real estate properties go to me," I stated. "I get full and sole custody of my son. His shares in Nexus Dynamics can remain, but I want 20% of his personal stake in his new AI venture, Project Nova, placed in a trust under my control." Cole adjusted his glasses. "A controlled trust for a pre-launch company. That will be a fight. I doubt Mr. Thorne will agree to those terms." I opened the photo on my phone and slid it across the desk to him. "Tell him if he doesn't agree. This picture goes out to the entire board of Nexus Dynamics by sunrise tomorrow." Cole barely glanced at the screen, his expression never changing. He just gave a slight nod. "Understood." Olivia, who stood by the window, went rigid, staring at me. Her eyes were a mixture of pity and utter shock. We had been friends for more than a decade. She'd never seen me like this. But then, why would she have? When was Amelia Thorne ever forced to be ruthless? For 20 years, I had been the perfect, gracious wife of a tech mogul. I managed our homes, raised our brilliant son, and was the smiling hostess at countless company dinners. When his startup almost failed, I sold 2 apartment buildings my parents left me to keep it afloat. When he finally made it big, I introduced him to every venture capitalist my father had ever known. When his own mother fell ill, I spent 2 years as her primary caregiver, as if she were my own flesh and blood. Everyone said Julian Thorne was lucky to have found such a perfect partner. And what did this perfect partner get in return? A secret 6-year-old son with his assistant, and I was the last one to know. I looked over the divorce papers again, picked up the pen, and just as I was about to sign, my phone buzzed. The screen flashed. "Alex!" I paused, then hit answer. "Mom, where are you?" My son's voice was different. It had a hard, steady edge I'd never heard from him before. "I'm just taking care of some things, honey." "Are you with a lawyer?" It wasn't a question, it was a fact. I glanced at Olivia. She quickly shook her head, mouthing the words, "Not me." "Alex, listen." "Mom, I know about Dad." Alex's voice was flat, like he was reading the weather. I found the files a few days ago. Security footage from the parking garage. Hotel bills, the rental agreement on her apartment, even the attendance sheets from her son's daycare. I have it all, and I'm about to give you an amazing gift. What gift? I could hear the sharp clatter of his keyboard through the phone. Alex laughed. A gift my father will regret for the rest of his life. Chapter 2. The masks come off. It was almost 6 p.m. when we left the lawyer's office. My sister Clara pulled the car over and asked if I wanted to eat. I just shook my head and asked her to drive me home. Home? What a bitter joke. Marcus and I had lived in this house for 15 years. I had chosen everything from the blueprints to the curtains. He once held my hand right here and said, "Anywhere with you is my home." I finally saw how a man's promises are just beautiful, empty words. The car slowed for the neighborhood security gate. I saw Marcus's black Mercedes parked in the driveway. Clara gripped the steering wheel, looking at me with concern. All she said was, "Call me if you need anything. I'm always here for you, day or night." Seriously. I got out. My heels clicked loudly on the stone walkway. At the front door, the biometric lock chirped and opened. The living room's warm golden light spilled into the hallway. Marcus was on the couch, one leg crossed over the other, watching the financial channel. A half-full glass of scotch sat on the coffee table. He heard the door but didn't look up, just asking, "Where have you been?" "The housekeeper said you left this afternoon." I dropped my bag on the console table and sat in the armchair facing him. This was my usual spot, where I'd sit each night, pouring his drink and listening to him discuss real estate deals I supposedly couldn't understand. Back then, I actually believed that was happiness. The simple, quiet life of a happy marriage. Now, the thought of it made me physically sick. Marcus Thorne, I used his full name. In 20 years, I'd almost never called him that. It was always Marcus or darling. He looked up, genuinely surprised, finally dragging his eyes from the screen to meet mine. He was a handsome man. At 50, his face was still sharp, and countless hours at the gym kept him in perfect shape. Anything he wore looked like $1 million. Isabelle Monet was 10 years younger than me. It's not shocking she fell for a man like him. I brought up the picture on my phone and showed it to him. He was hugging a small boy with Isabelle on his arm. All three of them were smiling blissfully. I tossed the phone onto the table. It landed with a dull thud on the glass. Marcus glanced at the photo, and the arrogant smile faded from his own face. But he didn't panic. He showed no fear at all. He just leaned back, picked up his scotch, took a sip, and looked me right in the eye. "Have you been paying someone to follow me?" he asked, his voice perfectly steady. I almost laughed out loud from pure rage. "Marcus Thorne, our son is a teenage genius. He found you. You're cheating on me in broad daylight, and our own child caught you." He took another slow sip of scotch, put the glass down, and after a long silence, he actually chuckled. "Well, since you know, I guess there's no reason to hide it." That single sentence shattered my last ounce of composure. "No reason to hide it." He said it so casually, as if talking about his lunch. "How old is the boy?" My own voice sounded like cracking ice. "He's 5. "And who is she?" "Isabelle Monet. You've met her." "I know I've met her." My nails dug into the fabric of the armchair. "I am asking you, who is she to you?" Marcus stood, walked to the huge floor-to-sizing window, and turned his back to me. The darkness outside reflected his shadow on the glass. "She is my son's mother," he said lightly, like he was stating a simple truth. I laughed. My lips were trembling, but I couldn't stop the twisted smile. "Your son? Then what about me? What about Alex? Who is he to you? He's 18. How many family dinners have you even had with him? Every coding competition, every single time he was sick, where were you?" Marcus turned around, a flash of annoyance crossing his face. "Elena, don't change the topic. Alex is my son. That will never change. But Noah needs a father too. Noah. He even had a name for him." I snatched the Scotch glass from the table and threw it against the stone fireplace. Amber liquid splashed everywhere. Shards of glass glittered in the light. Marcus frowned and took a step back. "What are you doing?" "What am I doing, Marcus? Why don't you tell me what I am doing?" I stood up and walked right to him. "I, Elena Thorne, have been your wife for 20 years. I gave you a son. I helped you build your company from a tiny office. I took care of your dying mother. And this is how you repay me?" 5 years. "You've been lying to my face for 5 whole years. I never wanted to lie to you." His voice was still so calm, so distant. "I just didn't know how to tell you. You didn't know how to tell me." I raised my hand and slapped him hard across his perfect face. The sharp crack echoed in the silent room. Marcus's head snapped to the side. 5 red finger marks started to appear on his cheek. He slowly turned his head back to me. His eyes had gone cold as stone. "Elena, calm down. I am perfectly calm." I took the divorce agreement from my bag and slammed it on the table. "Sign it, Marcus Thorne. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. at the lawyer's. The house, our son, and 20% of Thorne Realty Group stock in a trust. Everything else is mine." Marcus picked up the document and flipped through the pages. When he got to the asset division, he scowled. 20% in a trust? Are you crazy? You're the one who's crazy. Let's not waste more time. I held up my phone. If you don't sign, your entire board of directors, all your investors, and the business journals will get these photos and every single detail about your mistress and her child. The colour finally drained from Marcus's face. "You wouldn't dare. Don't you test me." We stood there, glaring at each other like 2 predators in a cage. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus took a deep breath and threw the papers back on the table. "Fine, 10 a.m. tomorrow. But the stock, I need to think about that." I pulled a pen from my purse and held it out. "Then write that condition into the agreement. If you refuse, you automatically give up all parental rights to Alex. Sign it." Marcus stared at the pen, his eyes burning with fury, but he contained it. Finally, he snatched it, scribbled a line on the last page, and threw the pen down. "Elena, you are going to regret this. The only thing I regret is ever saying yes to you." Without giving him another glance, I grabbed the papers and walked upstairs. I locked my bedroom door, dropped everything, and slid down against the wood, collapsing on the floor. All the strength I had downstairs was gone. My legs felt like jelly. Tears streamed down my face, but I made no sound. I just bit my lip until I could taste blood, swallowing the pain. My phone screen lit up. A text from Alex. "Mom!" I saw everything on the camera. Nice slap. I looked up at the tiny security camera in the corner. He had installed the smart home system himself. I'd completely forgotten. I wiped my tears and sent a voice message, trying to keep my voice steady. "Go to sleep, honey. I have a lot to do tomorrow." "Get some dinner for yourself," he replied in seconds. "Tomorrow can wait." "Mom, come to my room." I froze. When I came up, his door was closed and the lights were off. I thought he was asleep. I guess he hadn't even gone to bed. I took a shaky breath, got up, washed my face, changed and walked to his room. I knocked twice. I heard him say, "It's open." When I walked in, I was shocked. Alex's room was usually a total mess of computer parts and wires, his bed a disaster. But right now, it was perfectly tidy. The whiteboard on his wall was covered in printed documents, photos, and a complex timeline. In the center, 4 huge words were written in red. Phase 2, activated. He was sitting in his gaming chair with his back to me, facing 3 enormous curved monitors. The screens were a blur of scrolling code, spreadsheets, and live security feeds. I recognized some of it. They were internal reports from Thorn Realty Group. What is all this? He spun around, took off his glasses, and cleaned them on his t-shirt. Without them, his almond-shaped eyes, which were exactly like his father's, looked at me with a cold, sharp intelligence that was chilling for a teenager. It's proof of our father's crimes. Those words felt like a physical punch. Chapter 3. The Dawn Breaks. When Alex said that, it felt like all the oxygen left the room. I just stood in the doorway, staring at the 3 screens filled with endless data and video, unable to form a single word. This 18-year-old boy, the one I'd raised, was now sitting before me with the chilling calm of a general preparing for war. He looked nothing like the kid who used to beg for just 10 more minutes of video games. "What did you just say?" I stepped inside, quietly closed the door, and dropped my voice to a whisper. "What do you mean, crimes?" Alex put his glasses back on. His fingers flew across the keyboard. A folder appeared on the screen, filled with files, videos, and endless spreadsheets. "Mom, sit down, Mordel." He spun his chair around to face me. "Mom, I have to show you something, but you have to promise me you'll stay calm." I perched on the edge of his bed, my hands knotted together, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Okay, Alex." "I promise." He took a deep breath and pulled up a file. A spreadsheet flooded the screen, columns of numbers stretching on and on. I recognized the name, one of Julian's shell corporations, but not one I'd ever seen. The phone number was foreign. Dad set up this Cayman account 6 years ago. Alex pointed to lines glowing red. And in that time, he's funneled almost $40 million out of it. 40 million? The number echoed in my head, a dull throb behind my eyes. I knew Thorn Industries was a giant. I knew Julian S.'s personal fortune was astronomical. But 40 million in cash, just gone. From an account I never knew existed. Where did it go, Alex? He didn't say a word. He just opened another file. It was a property deed. An address for a sprawling ski lodge in Aspen. And the owner, Sofia Vargas, purchased 2 years ago in March. "This place is worth 5 million, Mom. Paid for in cash." Alex's voice was robotic, stripped of all emotion. The transfer came straight from the Cayman account. He opened a third file, a waterfront penthouse in Miami. This one was in Sofia Vargas's mother's name, but the payment source was the same, $6 million. Then another file, a new Porsche and a custom G-Wagon, both registered to her. Another $400,000, easy. I just stared, document after document. Each one felt like a physical blow. 6 years, $40 million, an Aspen lodge, a Miami penthouse, luxury cars. He built an entire life for her, with money that belonged to our family, to my son. He wasn't just laundering cash, Mom. Alex switched screens again, showing me a complex diagram of Thorn Industries' corporate structure. "Look, 3 years ago, Dad transferred 8% of his personal shares, through a labyrinth of shellcore, straight to Sofia Vargas. The holding company is registered in the Caymans. The director is a paid nobody, but the beneficial owner is Sofia." My hands started to shake. 8% of Thorn Industries, that was at least 70 million. Add that to the 40 million in cash and assets, and Julian had secretly given this woman over $100 million. How did you find any of this?" Alex pushed his glasses up, a ghost of a smile on his face, a chilling 6 of teenage pride and cold fury. "Mom, what do you think I do in here all day? I designed the entire smart network for this house. Dad's laptop, his phone, his tablet, they all run on my system." He thought his security was state-of-the-art. To me, it was a welcome mat. He hesitated, then added, "Besides, he was careless. He logged into his Cayman accounts from his office here at home. More than once. The browser history, saved passwords, authentication codes, it was all just sitting there." I was speechless. Was I supposed to be proud or terrified? My 18-year-old son had just methodically taken apart his own father's empire. But then I thought, what had Julian ever really given him? A man who barely acted like a father has no right to demand a son's loyalty. And then there's this. Alex opened a video file. It was a screen recording of a video call, taking place in a sleek, familiar office. It was Julian S.'s main office at Thorn Industries headquarters. Julian was at his desk, and on the screen was Sophia. Her voice was like honey laced with poison. "Julian, everything is ready for the new headquarters groundbreaking. You're still going to announce my appointment as Executive VP." "Correct." Julian leaned into the camera, smiling that easy, charming smile. "Of course, my love. It's all set. The board members will be there, the press you'll get up, say a few words, and I'll make the big announcement. And what if she puts up a fight about the divorce?" Sophia tilted her head, a practiced, perfect angle. "Your wife isn't a fool you can just push aside." Julian let out a short, sharp laugh. A laugh so cold it felt like it could freeze my blood. "Her? Clara?" he scoffed. "She's a trophy. She's lived in my house for 20 years, with everything handed to her on a silver platter. She has zero real-world experience. The only reason I stayed this long was so Alex could have a so-called normal childhood. Don't worry, now that he's older, it's time. If she's smart, she'll take the money I offer and vanish." "And if she isn't smart?" Sophia asked, her voice a purr. Julian leaned close to the camera, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. A whisper the microphone caught perfectly. "Then I'll throw her out with absolutely nothing. Every cent she has is tied to me. Her parents are gone. Who's left to help her fight me?" The video froze on Julian S.'s smiling, confident face. He was still so handsome, with that chiseled jaw and easy charm. But looking at him now, I felt a deep, chilling cold spread through my veins. "Mom!" Alex swiveled his chair to face me, his eyes locked on mine. His expression was calm, but I could see his fingers drumming on the desk, a restless energy. "I found all of this 3 days ago. Do you have any idea how hard it's been to keep this from you?" I reached out and ran my fingers through his hair. It was soft, like mine, not coarse like Julian S. They always called him the quiet one growing up. Who knew that behind that quietness he was building an arsenal? "Do you understand now why I told you not to sign those papers?" he asked. "I thought you were just worried he'd leave me with nothing." Alex shook his head, a grim little smile on his face. "It's worse than that, Mom." He switched axes again and pulled up one final document. It was an email. The sender was Julian Thorn. The recipient was Marcus Cole. I knew the name instantly. Marcus was the head of Thorn Industries' legal department, one of Julian's most loyal lieutenants. The email was brief, but every word was a dagger. "Marcus, we're moving forward with the post-divorce asset strategy. Under state law, if we can prove marital fault on Clara's part, I can drastically reduce her share of the estate. I need you to begin manufacturing the necessary evidence immediately. Also, after the groundbreaking, I want you to finalize the paperwork for Daniel's legal recognition. He needs to be formally included in the Thorn family trust. Regards, Julian." I read the email again and again, the words blurring. Julian hadn't just decided to leave me. He'd been plotting this for years, building a legal trap to disinherit me. He was going to fabricate an affair. Me, Clara Stone, the woman who had dedicated 20 years to being the perfect wife and mother. What could he possibly invent? And worse, the part about Daniel. Julian didn't just want to give Sophia money. He planned to formally welcome his illegitimate son into our family and steal my son's birthright. My hand shot out and grabbed Alex's wrist, my grip so tight my knuckles turned white. "Alex, he is not getting away with this." "I know, Mom, he's not." Alex gently placed his other hand over mine. "That's why I made you wait 3 days. He got up and walked over to a large whiteboard mounted on his wall. On it, he'd drawn a detailed timeline starting 3 days ago and ending next Wednesday. He tapped the final date, the Thorn Industries' new headquarters groundbreaking. It's at the Meridian Grand Ballroom. Alex said every major investor, business partner, and a dozen journalists will be there. He circled the date. Dad plans on making 2 big announcements. First, the launch of the new global headquarters. And second, Sofia Vargas's promotion to executive vice president. Alex turned to look at me, his smile unreadable, like a predator cornering its prey. But he has no idea there's going to be a third announcement. He pulled a small, sleek box from his desk drawer and opened it. Inside was a tiny microphone. small enough to pin to a dress connected to a transmitter. "I've already bypassed the Hotel S entire audio-visual network," Alex said, as casually as if he were talking about a video game. "So, what do you want them to see and hear? You just have to tell me." I picked up the small device, feeling its cool metal against my skin. "Mom." He met my gaze, his own eyes burning with intensity. "Mom." Then he said it, his voice quiet but sharper than any knife. "I'm not asking you to fight for a bigger settlement. I'm asking you to bury him." The words hung in the air for a long moment. I finally stood up from the bed and walked to the whiteboard, my eyes tracing the timeline. The date Sophia was hired at Thorn Industries, the date her son was born, the date the Cayman account was opened, the date of every withdrawal, every property purchase, every single secret payment. All of it laid out like an invasion plan, cold and irrefutable. I turned back around, clutching the tiny microphone. Alex smiled, and then he did something I'd never seen before. He made a fist and held it out for me to bump. I balled my fist and bumped his. Let's burn them down. Chapter 4. Preparing for war. I didn't sleep at all that night. Lying in our huge master bedroom, the space next to me felt cold and empty. William was gone, and I had no idea when he left. Maybe he went to the office. Maybe he went to Vanessa's place. I honestly couldn't make myself care anymore. I just laid there in that massive bed, staring up at the ceiling, replaying every piece of proof my son had shown me. When the sun finally came up, I gave up trying to sleep. I showered and put on a sharp, black tailored suit. While doing my makeup, I saw a woman I didn't recognize in the mirror flawless mask, cold eyes. Who had I become? The gentle, perfect wife of William Prescott, the always understanding Catherine. Everyone always praised my quiet demeanor and perfect manners. And what did I get in return? 6 years of him cheating, $120 million of our money stolen, and a legal letter designed to leave me with absolutely nothing. Finishing my lipstick, I spoke to my reflection. "Catherine Brooks, you've woken up late, but it's not too late." At 7:30, I walked downstairs. Maria had already prepared the breakfast table. Buttermilk pancakes and crispy bacon, William's favourite. For 20 years, every single breakfast in this house was made for him. I always just wanted coffee and a croissant, but never said a word. It felt so pathetic now. Mr. Prescott left last night, and he hasn't returned. "Should I try calling him?" Maria asked. "No, that's not necessary." I picked up my coffee, taking a sip. My voice was surprisingly firm. "By the way, Maria, from now on, please don't make breakfast for him. Just make coffee and croissants. That's what I prefer." Maria froze for a second. She could tell something was off but didn't push it. She just nodded. "Of course, ma'am." After my breakfast, I went upstairs and knocked on Alex's door. Silence. I pushed it open to find him asleep, face down on his desk. His glasses were crooked, a little drool on his chin. 3 computer monitors were still glowing, filled with scrolling lines of code. I went to wake him for bed, but the moment I got near, he shot straight up. "Mom, what time is it?" 7:40. "Why weren't you sleeping in your bed?" He rubbed his eyes and adjusted his glasses, his voice still hoarse. "I was digging through Vanessa Parker's social media all night. Many of her posts on Instagram and her private Facebook page are going to be very useful." He typed on the keyboard, and screenshots filled the screens. The profile picture on her private Instagram showed her holding their son, with the caption, "My entire universe." Below it were more posts. One from with a Hermes bag, captioned, "Birthday gift from my hubby." Another showed a huge lobster dinner in Maine. Hubby says fall is for lobster. Alex had circled the date on every single post in a bright red. Look at these dates. Last September, when she posted this, Dad told you he was at a tech conference in Dallas. He was actually having lobster with her in Maine. And the year before that, on Valentine's Day, he said he was with clients down in Miami, but he was on vacation with her in St. Bart's. I just stared at the posts, each date marked so clearly, sitting right next to William's lies. All this evidence created a perfect 6-year timeline of his affair that was impossible to deny. But that wasn't everything. Alex opened another file. Mom, look at this. I found it last night. It's a draft of an internal audit report for Horizon Tech. On the screen was a PDF file titled Internal Audit Report, Horizon Tech Incorporated, 2024, Draft. 2 specific bullet points were highlighted in bright yellow. I leaned in closer and my heart just stopped. The first point said, "During our review, we identified strong suspicions of insider trading. CEO William Prescott executed trades via connected offshore accounts just before major public announcements. The estimated transaction volume is $50 million US. The second point read, "The vetting process for the vice president nominee has significant problems. The documentation verifying the qualifications of VP candidate Vanessa Parker is incomplete. Additionally, her undisclosed personal relationship with CEO William Prescott is a major violation of corporate governance policies." I looked up at Alex. "Where did you get this?" "It was on Horizon's internal servers. They use a standard enterprise cloud service. The security is decent, but for me, it's like playing with Legos easy to take apart." He said it so casually, but I could see the bloodshot in his eyes. He'd clearly been up all night working. The internal audit team sent this 3 days ago. The draft hasn't been sent to the board yet. Dad is holding it back, trying to pressure the auditors to remove those 2 points before he forwards it. So he didn't just have an affair. He committed serious federal crimes. Yep, Alex smirked. 50 million in insider trading. Under SEC rules, that's enough to land him in federal prison for years, not to mention the embezzlement and falsifying records. Mom, I don't want him to just lose. I want him absolutely destroyed. I leaned back against his desk with my arms crossed, quiet for a long time. Outside, the birds were chirping. The morning sun lit up my son's face, which still had a trace of boyhood. 18 years old. At this age, other kids are thinking about college applications and their first crush. My son was busy calculating his own father's federal prison sentence. "Alex," I started, my voice trembling slightly, "do you hate him?" Alex didn't answer immediately. He took off his glasses and slowly wiped them on shirt, looking down so I couldn't see his expression. After a long moment, he finally spoke. "Mom, do you remember when I was in 4th grade, I won that regional math competition? First place. On the day of the awards ceremony," I reminded him, and he swore he'd be there. "I waited by the auditorium doors for 2 hours. After every other person had left, you were the only one still standing there with me." He put his glasses back on and looked me right in the eyes. They were a little red. After that day, I stopped hating him. Because when you stop expecting things, you can't be disappointed. "But Mom," his face suddenly looked hard, like a grown man's. "He should never have hurt you. That's the one thing I can't forgive." My eyes started to sting. Before the tears could fall, I turned away, taking deep breaths to get myself under control. Now was not the time to cry. "I can cry after this is all finished, okay?" I patted his shoulder. The day after tomorrow, at the launch event, I want you to put everything we have into a single package. You take care of the tech side, and I'll take care of the performance." Alex smiled, and for just a moment, he looked exactly like his father, but also completely different. William's smile was all fake charm and calculation. Alex's smile was pure, cold focus. "Mom, I've got something for you." He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a small jewelry box. I opened it. Inside was a gorgeous sapphire brooch. "There's a high-definition micro camera and a microphone hidden inside," Alex explained. "It has a 120-degree wide-angle lens with a 30-foot audio pickup range. Just press the button on the side and it starts live streaming straight to me. I've already built a back door into the Plaza Hotel's projector system. The moment you press it, everyone in that entire room is going to see exactly what you want them to." I picked up the brooch. It was so beautifully crafted. You'd never guess it was full of electronics. The sapphire in the middle gleamed in the light, as cold and blue as a frozen lake. "You're a little genius. If you put this much effort into your schoolwork, you'd already be at MIT." Alex just laughed. "What's the fun in MIT?" "The real challenge is taking down Dad with you." I couldn't help but laugh with him. It was the first real laugh I'd had since yesterday. That afternoon, I went on with my day like nothing was wrong. I went to the salon for a manicure and a facial. The esthetician complimented me, saying I didn't look a day over 30. I just smiled, thinking to myself, the day after tomorrow, everyone will see that Catherine Brooks doesn't just look good, she's hiding a weapon. Around 4 p.m, my phone began to ring. William's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it for a few seconds before answering, intentionally making my voice sound soft. "Hello, Catherine?" His voice was filled with surprise. He clearly did not expect me to sound so calm. "About the divorce, I think we need to talk again. Let's not go to the courthouse tomorrow." A cold smile spread across my face, but my voice remained sweet. "Oh? Did you change your mind?" "I haven't changed my mind." He hesitated, obviously choosing his words carefully. "I just think we've been married for 20 years. There's no need to turn this into some huge, ugly public scandal. We can discuss the division of assets calmly. There's no need to rush into things. Talk calmly. He just needed to buy more time. Time to make the audit report disappear. Time for his product launch to succeed. Time for Vanessa's promotion to go through. After all that, he would have all the power, and he wouldn't want to talk. He'd want to crush me. Well, I leaned back into the sofa, crossing my legs. My voice was even. "You're right. 20 years is a long time. It would be better to end things amicably. We don't have to go to court tomorrow. But my lawyer is still drafting the papers, and none of my terms have changed." The line went dead. "Clara, you really think you can threaten me?" he'd sneered. What did he think? I ended the call. Outside, the Chicago skyline glittered against the twilight. I sat there, phone in my hand, feeling a strange sense of peace. This was the quiet before the demolition. In 2 days, at the gala celebrating his new skyscraper, I, Clara Blackwood, would wear my sharpest dress and highest heels. I would walk into that ballroom full of vipers and bring the truth crashing down around them. My husband Ethan thought I was just his docile wife. He had no idea that my son Leo and I were playing an entirely different game. The next morning, the day before Ethan's big unveiling, the doorbell screamed through the quiet house. 7:30 a.m. Our housekeeper was off, so it was just me and Leo in our Lincoln Park home. I slipped on a robe and went downstairs, assuming it was a package. But when I pulled the door open, my breath caught in my throat. It was Isabella Vance, dressed in a razor-sharp white suit, designer bag in one hand, and in the other, the hand of a small boy. A child dressed in a tiny bespoke blazer, his hair perfectly coiffed. His dark eyes stared up at me, full of a child's curiosity. Behind them, a nanny held a set of luggage, like they were checking in. "Mrs. Blackwood!" Isabella's smile was so bright it was nauseating. Her voice was pure saccharine. "I am so sorry to just show up. Ethan was at my place last night, and he left in such a rush he forgot his keys to the studio. I thought I'd bring them over for Noah to give his father, and to show our son where his daddy lives." Her words were a dull roar in my ears. My place, where his daddy lives. Each phrase was a poisoned dart, but I held my ground, my face a calm mask, and I smiled. "Is that so? By all means, come in." As I stepped back, I saw the briefest flash of confusion in Isabella's eyes. This wasn't in her script. She was expecting a meltdown, a screaming match, maybe a complete collapse. She strolled past me, leading the boy, her sharp heels clicking in arrogant rhythm on our polished floors. The child looked around, wide-eyed, before asking, "Mommy, is this Daddy's house?" "It's huge." "Yes, my love, and very soon." "We'll get to live here too," she cooed, bending down but projecting her voice straight at me. I shut the door slowly and just watched the theatre unfold. Mentally, I was going through a list of ancient curses, but on my face, a polite smile stayed perfectly in place. "Please, have a seat. Can I offer you some water?" "Oh, don't you worry about me, Mrs. Blackwood." Isabella sank into our Italian leather sofa like she was holding court, crossing her legs elegantly. "I'm only here to leave the keys, then I'll be out of your hair." She said she was leaving, but she sat there as if she were planning where to hang her own art. The nanny let Noah explore, and he toddled right over to the glass display case, He pressed his face to the glass, reaching for the Silver Architecture Award on the bottom shelf. It was Ethan's first major prize. My jaw tightened, but I let it happen. Isabella pulled a sleek key card for Ethan's firm from her purse. She set it on the table, then looked up at me with a knowing smirk. Mrs. Blackwood, there was actually something else I wanted to discuss. And there it is, I thought. She's finally getting to the point. Go on. I sat in the armchair, facing her, projecting nothing but calm. Isabella straightened her jacket, leaned in like we were old friends, and lowered her voice. Mrs. Blackwood, I know you're aware of Ethan and me, and I can only imagine how painful this must be. Honestly, I feel absolutely awful about how this has played out. She said awful, but her face was practically glowing with triumph. I stared back, saying, letting her spin her web, but you can't control the heart. Ethan and I have been in love for 5 years. Noah is almost 5. You're a mother, Clara. Surely you can understand wanting the best for your child. I don't want him to carry the shame of his parents' situation forever. He deserves a proper family. As she spoke, her eyes became glossy with crocodile tears. It was a Broadway-level performance. I had to give her that. So I asked, my voice flat, what is it that you want? She bit her lip, a perfect picture of tortured reluctance. Let him go. There's nothing left between you. Dragging this on just hurts everyone. If you agree to leave quietly, we'll see to it you're compensated generously. That phrase hung in the air. Compensated generously. I wanted to laugh in her face. I, Clara Blackwood, had been with Ethan for 15 years. My inheritance funded his first design studio. My family's connections secured his first big contracts. I poured 15 years of my soul into building his career and our life together. And now his mistress was offering to compensate me, like I was some inconvenient secretary. Miss Vance, I began, my voice suddenly like steel. Are you finished? She froze, thrown by the sudden shift. Mrs. Blackwood, I came here to be sincere with you. Sincere? I let out a short, sharp laugh. Miss Vance, if you were sincere, you wouldn't have brought your son to my house at this hour. So, are you here for the keys or the performance? Because we both know the answer. The smirk on Isabella's face vanished, but she quickly slipped her victim mask back on. Mrs. Blackwood, you're misunderstanding my intentions. I truly just wanted to... A voice from the top of the stairs cut her off. We both looked up. Leo was there, leaning on the banister in a grey hoodie, hands stuffed in his pockets. His hair was a wreck, making him look like a typical groggy teenager, but his eyes were anything but. Those eyes, identical to his father's, scanned Isabella and Noah with a cold, assessing gaze that finally settled on the keys. Who is this? He asked, feigning ignorance. At the sight of him, Isabella's expression changed. She wasn't stupid. She knew Leo's role in this family. The heir, 18, and not some child she could win over. Hello, you must be Leo. Ethan talks about you all the time. You're even more handsome in person. Isabella stood, turning on a warm, charming smile. Leo ignored the compliment completely. He walked down the stairs deliberately and stopped beside the awards case. Noah was still on his toes, his small fingers finally brushing the base of the silver award, making it rock. Leo's hand shot out and stilled it. Hey, kid, he said, looking down at Noah. His voice wasn't harsh, but it held no warmth. Don't touch things that don't belong to you. Noah, shocked by the tone, scrunched up his face and began to scream. Isabella rushed over, scooped him into her arms, and glared at me. Mrs. Blackwood, he's just a child. It's a silly little trophy. Was that necessary? Before I could even open my mouth, Leo spoke. Miss Vance. He put a weird stress on her name. You said you came to drop off the keys. The keys are right there. So shouldn't you be going? Isabella's face finally twisted into an ugly sneer. She clearly hadn't expected Leo to be so direct, leaving her no room to play her games. She hugged Noah tighter, drew herself up, and let the polite mask drop completely. Clara. She didn't even bother with Mrs. Blackwood. You see how he treats me? Fine. If we're done with the games, I'll be honest. Ethan's heart is with me now. And soon enough, so will this house be. If you walk away now with some dignity, you'll get a nice settlement. But if you fight this, you will walk away with absolutely nothing." She then pulled a cashier's check from her purse and slapped it on the table. I looked down. It was for $500,000. Ethan had leveraged $20 million of our joint assets for this new building, and his mistress was trying to buy me out for pocket change. I stared at the check for a long moment before I deliberately reached out and picked it up. A smug, triumphant smile lit up Isabella S.'s face. She actually thought I was taking it, that my pride was worth $500,000. And then I tore the check right down the middle. "Miss Vance." I stood up, looking down at her from my full height. My voice was steady and as cold as ice. "Today, you brought a child into my home to try and humiliate me. I can forgive that as a sign of your immaturity and your desperation. But I'm going to give you one piece of advice, and I need you to listen very carefully." I took a step closer, crowding her, and spoke each word with precision. "This is my home, the home of Clara Blackwood, and until I am the one who signs divorce papers, neither you nor your son will ever set foot in here again. Now take your bags and get the hell out." Isabella S.'s face contorted into a mask of pure rage. She grabbed Noah, snatched her purse, and stormed out. At the door, she spun back, her eyes filled with raw hatred. "You'll regret this, Chloe. We'll see," she spat, and the front door slammed. Leo, my son, had been quiet until then. He just held up his phone. It was recording. I got all of it, every word. He slipped it back into his pocket, grinning. "Mom, when you told her to get the hell out? Absolutely epic." I couldn't help but smile back. "What about those keys?" Leo picked up the key fob from the table, flipping it in the air. A little glint of mischief in his eye. "Dad's spare office key. Funny thing is, he took the train to work. He never left this at her apartment. She brought it here as a prop, to prove he spent the whole night with her." Exactly. Leo let the keys clatter onto the table, but her little prop completely backfired. "Dad's key fob has a location chip. I tracked it. The keys were at her apartment last night. Sure, but his phone's location data shows he left her place at 11 p.m. He was at his downtown office working until 4 in the morning. I just stood there for a beat, and then I laughed. So, Chloe was lying through her teeth. Marcus was with her, yes, but he didn't stay. He was there a few hours, then left. She showed up with those keys just to intimidate me, to make me think this whole affair was way more serious than it actually is. The woman is all bluff." Leo was right. He said the harder she pushes, the more desperate she is. "Dad must have promised her everything, and now he's backing out. That's why she's panicking. He'll never actually do it." I scoffed. "Men like Marcus only love themselves. Chloe is just a shiny new toy. Once he's bored, he'll just discard her." Did she honestly believe he would divorce me and split his empire for her? Leo just nodded. "So the real issue isn't Chloe, it's my husband. And tomorrow, at his big product launch, we're going to take them both down." I stood by the window, watching the first light break through the dark. The jasmine I planted 3 years ago was blooming. Its scent usually calmed me. "Leo, what if this all blows up in our faces tomorrow at the launch?" "It won't." His voice, right behind me, was pure confidence. "I'm running the entire show from the background. The feed is streaming to 3 offshore servers. I've already bypassed the hotel's security network. Every exit, fire escape, the control room, I own it all." He stepped beside me and showed me his phone. A detailed schematic of the Grand Astoria's ballroom was on the screen, every entrance and exit marked. "I'll be in a coffee shop right across the street, not even a block away. If anything goes wrong, I can be there in 3 minutes flat. And this," he pulled a simple, sleek pen from his pocket and gave it to me. "It's a panic button. 1 click sends all our proof to the Department of Justice, every major news network, and the Attorney General. If things go sideways and I lose control, just click it. Everything goes public in an instant." I took the pen. It felt cool and solid in my palm. "Thank you." I looked at my son, my chest aching with pride and a little bit of sadness. "Having you was the best thing I've ever done." Leo got all flustered, the tips of his ears turning bright pink. He looked away, muttering, "Okay, Mom. Enough drama. Tomorrow is a war. I know." I ruffled his hair, managing a small laugh. Outside, the sun was up, the jasmine dancing in the morning light. Tomorrow was the final battle. I am Eleanor Vance. I've swallowed my pride for 20 years and held my fury in check for 3 days. Tomorrow, on that stage, they will pay for everything. Around 3 p.m., while I was pressing the suit for my speech, my phone rang. An unknown number, but the caller ID looked official. I paused, then picked up. Hello, am I speaking with Eleanor Vance, Leo Thorne's mother? The voice was male, polite, and professionally smooth. Yes, this is she. Who am I speaking with? My name is Mr. Davies, the admissions director at the Glenmore Academy. I'm calling because a Mr. Marcus Thorne submitted an application for your son, Leo, this morning. He wants to enroll him in our final year, and we just need to confirm your consent. The iron nearly slipped from my hand. A transfer? Where is this school? We're in the Highlands of Scotland. It's a very exclusive boarding school. Mr. Thorne applied for him to be a full-time boarder, meaning he would only return home for major holidays. A boarding school. In Scotland. Marcus was trying to send my son to Scotland. The day before the biggest launch of his career, he was trying to ship his own son overseas. Why was he so desperate to get Leo away from here? I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. Mr. Davies, I knew nothing about this. Can you tell me, does that application have my signature on it? There was a rustle of papers. It only has Mr. Thorne's signature. The other guardian's line is blank, which is why we have to call for confirmation. You are his mother, correct? I am telling you right now, officially, I do not consent. My son is not going to Scotland. Please cancel that application immediately. Understood, Mrs. Vance. We'll return the papers to Mr. Thorne. After hanging up, I was just frozen. The iron was still hot in my hand. My reflection in the mirror was a mask of fury, my jaw clenched tight. Marcus. He was trying to ship my son out of the country. I slammed the iron down to call Leo, but my phone rang again. It was my friend Sarah. Eleanor! She yelled, her voice frantic. You have to get to Leo's school now. His counselor just called me. Someone is there, filing withdrawal papers for him. Someone is in the office right now. My head was spinning. First Scotland, now this. Trying to pull him from his school here in Chicago. It was a coordinated attack. Who is it? Who's there? A lawyer representing Marcus Thorne with power of attorney. He's saying Leo is transferring to study abroad, so they need to process his withdrawal. I'm on my way. I hung up, grabbed my keys, and bolted. On my way out, I sent Leo a voice message. Honey, your father's lawyer is at school trying to pull you out. I'm going there to stop it. Stay home. Do not go anywhere. Just as I turned onto the main road, my phone rang. It was Leo. Mom, don't go to the school. His voice was too calm. So calm it made me furious. What are you talking about? Your father is trying to send you to Scotland. He applied to a new school and sent a lawyer to unenroll you, all on the same day. He's trying to get rid of you. I know, Leo said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I shut down the withdrawal request an hour ago. I have a back door into the school's admin system. Any change to my records requires my two-factor authentication code. Without it, his lawyer's request is totally useless. I slammed on the brakes. What did you just say? I said Dad isn't sending me anywhere. Mom, turn the car around and come home. You're driving too fast. I'll explain everything when you get here. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back, my heart pounding. For a few minutes, I had been completely terrified. Marcus went after my son. My son is my only weakness. He could steal from the company, have his affair, even have a child with her. I could deal with all of it until the launch. But touching Leo? I would never tolerate that. I turned the car around and raced home. Leo was waiting in the living room, 2 laptops open on the coffee table, each displaying a different screen. One screen was his school's admin page. The other was a program I didn't recognize. Look, he turned a laptop towards me. I found out Dad wasn't just trying to transfer me. He was doing this too. It was an email. The sender was from inside Thorne Dynamics, sent to a list of lawyers I'd never seen. I leaned closer. The subject line read, Confidential report on Eleanor Vance. My hands went cold. When did he send this? Just after 1 p.m. today. I stopped 3 of them, but 1 got out. Look at the attachment. He clicked open a PDF file, a long, formal document. The cover page read, in bold, Report on the Marital Misconduct of Eleanor Vance. In the corner was the official seal of the Thorn Dynamics legal department. I scrolled down, my stomach twisting. It listed over a dozen accusations of misconduct. Pictures of me at business lunches with colleagues were cropped to look like dates. They twisted old social media posts into something sinister. One section even called me a neglectful wife, using our housekeeper of 10 years, Sophia, as proof I couldn't manage my own home. It was absolute garbage, but every single page had the company's legal stamp and the signature of a Mr. Jennings, the same lawyer who advised Marcus to gather evidence against me. He plans to use this in court, Ethan said quietly. I found it on the shared drive this morning. Last week, Dad hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on you. He was never going to settle this divorce amicably. He's been preparing for total war from day one. I collapsed onto the sofa, my fingers digging into the cushions. So all that talk about mediation was just to keep me off guard. Exactly. He never wanted peace. And that architecture program in Zurich? That was to get me out of the picture. With me gone, he thought he could ruin you. Ethan slammed the laptop shut and met my gaze. For the first time, I saw pure rage in my son's eyes. He's been plotting against you. But trying to use me to do it? Mom, how can a man like that even call himself a father? I looked at the slanderous report, and a strange quiet settled over me. The panic, the rage, it all evaporated. In its place was a sharp, cold clarity. It was like a shock of icy water, freezing but making everything crystal clear. Julian had planned for everything, hiding assets, manufacturing lies, shipping his own son away. Every move was designed to leave me with nothing. But he'd made one massive error. He assumed that after 18 years, his son would blindly follow him. He was so wrong. The person who raised Ethan wasn't some powerful architect named Croft, but the woman who checked his math homework and sat with him through every flu. I looked at my son. The proof, the stolen designs, the corporate fraud, everything. Is it enough to completely sink him at the launch event? Ethan pushed up his glasses, a sly smile on his face. Oh, it's more than enough, Mom. This is going to utterly obliterate him. Mom, you'll never guess what I did. He wants me in Zurich for that summer program, right? Well, I used his personal account to send the $500 deposit for it. I was stunned, completely lost. Why would you do that? To make him think he's won, Ethan said, a shrewd glint in his eye. He believes I'm just going to pack up and leave quietly. He showed me his phone and email from Julian. Ethan, glad you're being so mature about this. Once you're in Zurich, I'll make sure you have a generous allowance. I promise I won't let you down, Dad. Can I come to the project unveiling tomorrow before I leave? I'd love to see it. The reply was almost immediate. Absolutely, I'll have a front row seat waiting for you. I stared at the screen, caught between laughter and tears. Julian actually thought his son was on his side, having no idea he was about to be betrayed. Ethan shut his laptop, his expression serious. Mom, tomorrow I'm going to expose everything. All you have to do is stand there with your head held high and remind them who you really are. I met his gaze and nodded slowly. 20 years ago, I gave up the name Elar Reed to become Mrs. Croft. Tomorrow, Chicago is going to learn my real name all over again. The morning arrived. Wednesday, 9:30 a.m. at the Drake Hotel's Grand Ballroom. 30 minutes before the Ethelred Spire unveiling, I sat at my vanity, fastening a simple silver lapel pin to my charcoal suit. I had chosen the outfit carefully. It was powerful, perfectly tailored, with sharp heels to match. The woman in the mirror wasn't Julian's wife. She was Elara Reed. My reflection stared back with a cool, determined gaze, like polished steel. Mom, are you ready? Ethan's voice called from the hall. Ready? I stepped out. He was in a crisp, dark suit, looking more like a young executive than a teenager. He gave me a confident nod. You look perfect. Let's go. The ride to the hotel was silent, the tension thick in the air. As the city blurred past the window, one thought echoed in my mind. 20 years ago, I entered Julian's world in a white dress. Today, in a grey suit, I was walking into his greatest triumph to end our marriage. It felt like coming full circle. A block from the hotel, Ethan got out. He adjusted my lapel pin and spoke in a low voice. "The camera is live. The mic feeds straight to the house audio. I'll be in the AV booth. If you need me to hijack the main screens, just brush your hair back from your left ear. That's the signal." I nodded. "Mom," he said, pausing. "No matter what, I'm with you." I squeezed his hand and walked toward the entrance. Inside, the lobby was draped in banners for Ethelred Designs, the city's elite, wearing VIP passes, mingled by the elevators. As I crossed the marble floor, I felt every eye in the room turn to me. "Isn't that Julian's wife?" "Yeah, Elara Croft." "What's she doing here? She never comes to these things." "Wow, she looks amazing." I ignored the murmurs and walked directly into the ballroom. It was packed with at least 200 people. The front rows were reserved for investors and city officials, media in the center, employees at the rear. A huge screen behind the stage showed a cinematic promo for the new skyscraper. My seat was in the second row, on the aisle, with a clear view of the podium. The nameplate read Elara Croft, spouse of the CEO. I looked at the words and let out a cold, quiet laugh. At 10 o'clock on the dot, the lights dimmed. A host in a sleek dress came out, welcoming everyone to the Ethelred Spire unveiling. First, a dramatic video. Then the lead engineer came out to discuss the building's design. The room filled with polite applause every few minutes. It was all unfolding, just like always. I sat patiently, then casually brushed the hair back from my left ear. The pin vibrated once, a tiny confirmation from Ethan. 20 minutes later, the engineer finished. The lights went down, the host returned. And now, please join me in welcoming the visionary CEO of Ethelred Designs, Mr. Julian Croft. A spotlight hit Julian. He rose, adjusted his designer jacket, and strode onto the stage, radiating success in a perfect dark suit. He looked handsome and vital, far younger than his 50 years. He reached the podium and the room fell silent. "Honoured board members, partners and members of the press, good morning. Thank you for being here for the launch of Ethelred's new vision." His voice was rich and confident, a voice I once found so reassuring. Now, all I could hear was 20 years of lies. "Ethelred Designs is 22 years old," Julian went on. "From a boutique studio, we have become a global force in sustainable architecture and urban planning. And we could not have done it without your unwavering support." A wave of applause followed. When it died down, he continued, "Today is not just about a building, but about a pivotal decision regarding the future leadership of this firm." My pulse quickened. This was the moment. In the front row sat Sophia Rossi. She wore a striking crimson dress, her posture perfect. At the mention of a leadership change, a smug smile touched her lips, and she seemed to glow. "Miss Sophia Rossi has been my indispensable partner for 5 years, demonstrating extraordinary talent. By a unanimous board decision, effective today, Miss Sophia Rossi is appointed as Chief Creative Officer for Ethelred Designs." The spotlight moved to Sophia. She rose and gave a polished, modest bow. Her smile was controlled, but her eyes blazed with victory. Applause broke out, along with hushed comments. "Isn't she just a junior partner? Straight to CCO? You haven't heard the gossip?" Julian raised a hand for silence, about to call her to the stage, and that's when I stood up. My grey suit was understated, but my movement made the entire ballroom go quiet. A few board members in the front row glanced back. One knew me and gave a weak, confused smile. "Mrs. Croft, I didn't realise you were here." Julian saw me then. His perfect smile faltered for a half second before snapping back into place. "Elara, is everything all right?" With a pleasant smile, I moved into the aisle and started walking toward him. The sharp sound of my heels cut through the silence. Every single person was watching me, 200 pairs of eyes. The murmurs began again. Phones were raised. "Mr. Croft," I called out, stopping at the stairs to the stage. My voice was calm and strong. "This is such an important day for Ethelred. And as your wife, I've prepared a little presentation myself as a gift for you and the board." Would you all like to see it? Julian's expression finally broke. He knew me. After 2 decades, he could read my face perfectly. I was smiling, but my eyes were filled with a cold rage he didn't recognize. Elara, we have a very tight schedule. Perhaps we can discuss this privately after the event. His voice was soft, but laced with warning. Sophia's face was a mask of fury. I turned to the audience. Board members, members of the press. My name is Elara Reed, and I ask you all to be my witnesses today. This data came directly from Vanguard Dynamics' own servers. Its integrity verified. If you have any questions, feel free to run a full forensic audit. As I finished the thought, I touched my left earring. The product demo on the giant screen flickered and died. After a moment of darkness, a new image lit up the stage, and a collective gasp filled the entire room. On screen was a photo of Marcus Vance hugging a small boy, with Isabella Reed clinging to his arm like a doting wife. Bold text appeared over the picture. Vanguard CEO Marcus Vance's affair with his subordinate Isabella Reed. They have a 5-year-old secret son. The ballroom instantly exploded into chaos. The board members in the front row shot up out of their chairs. The reporters in the back surged forward like a human tsunami, their cameras flashing relentlessly. The strobing lights made the entire room feel like it was glitching. Live streamers immediately spun their phones toward the screen, narrating the pandemonium. This was a bombshell, a massive scandal, dropping on the Vanguard CEO right in the middle of his flagship product launch. Marcus's face turned completely white. He whipped around to stare at the screen, a vein throbbing on his forehead. He ran to the edge of the stage and screamed, "Who did this? Cut the feed! Turn it off now!" He was shouting at the tech team, but they were in a total panic, clicking away without any effect. That picture on the screen was frozen solid, locked into place. I imagined Alex sitting in a cafe just down the street. You could smash their equipment with a sledgehammer and it wouldn't make a difference. Utter chaos reigned. The press swarmed the stage, their camera flashes popping like firecrackers. The executives looked like they were going to be sick. Mr. Davenport, an older, silver-haired director and the second largest shareholder, rose to his feet, slamming his cane down. "Marcus Vance! What in the world is the meaning of this?" Marcus stumbled back, bumping into the massive screen behind him like a cornered animal. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "It's a lie. It's a deep fake. I'm being framed." I stood there below, arms crossed, calmly watching his world fall apart. This was the final blow. Marcus was trapped on the stage. The proof of his affair glowed behind him as he faced 200 pairs of eyes filled with either shock, fury, or pure delight. Sweat was pouring down his face. His perfectly styled hair was now a wreck, plastered to his skin. His powerful presence was gone, replaced by raw, animalistic panic. "It's a fake! Someone is trying to destroy me!" he yelled, his voice cracking a universe away from his usual confident boom. "Techs, shut it down this instant!" The technicians were frantic, hammering on their keyboards, but the image didn't even flicker. The reporters had now completely mobbed the front of the stage. Cameras flashed again and again. Mr. Davenport, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple, aimed his cane straight at Marcus. "Marcus, is this true? Have you completely lost your senses?" Other investors were on their feet, yelling over the noise. "What is going on, Mr. Vance? You owe every single one of us an explanation." Marcus's lips were trembling. Sweat dripped down his face, soaking the collar of his $1,000 shirt. He instinctively glanced toward Isabella. The woman, who moments ago was radiating success, was now collapsed in her chair, her face as white as a sheet. Her bright red suit practically glowed under the camera flashes. A journalist spotted her and thrust a microphone in her face. "Miss Reed, is that you in the picture? Are you having an affair with Mr. Vance? Is that boy his secret son?" Isabella threw her hands over her face and shrieked, "Don't film me! Stop! That isn't me!" She was just babbling. A complete disaster, looking nothing like a poised vice president. Her own colleagues were physically leaning away from her, as if her disgrace was contagious. I watched the entire scene unfold with zero pity. A cold, sharp sense of satisfaction spread through me, like taking a sip of ice water on a scorching day. But I wasn't done. I tapped my left earring again. The screen changed. Now, it was displaying the financial evidence Alex had uncovered. Banks, statements from the Cayman Islands, and a 6-year ledger of wire transfers that added up to $40 million. It was all laid out with brutal clarity. Every single payment was tied to real estate, sports cars, and luxury items, all under Isabella's name. The text on the screen read, "It has been confirmed that Marcus Vance used an offshore account to embezzle $40 million of marital and corporate assets. This was used to purchase a San Francisco penthouse, a Malibu beach house, luxury cars, and other gifts for his mistress, Isabella Reed. See details on the right." The room erupted all over again. Mr. Davenport shoved through the reporters, snatched a microphone from the podium, and shouted, his voice shaking with absolute rage, "Marcus Vance, did you embezzle company funds? Is our money part of that $40 million? Answer me!" Marcus was frozen solid. He opened his mouth and then closed it, unable to form a single word. I tapped my earring one last time. The screen changed again, this time to a hidden camera video from inside his office. Marcus stood behind Isabella, his hand resting on her shoulder. "And what if she refuses to sign the divorce papers?" Isabella asked. Marcus just sneered, and his cruel words echoed through the ballroom's sound system. "Catherine, she's just a pretty decoration. If she's smart, she'll take the money and get out of my life. If not, I'll throw her onto the street with absolute nothing." If anyone still had doubts about the previous evidence, this video was the final nail in his coffin. The man in that video was clearly Marcus. His face, his voice, it was all undeniable. The words "pretty decoration" and "throw her out with nothing" landed like a physical blow. Mr. Davenport was trembling with fury. He raised his cane and pointed it right at Marcus. "So this is what you've been up to? Promoting your mistress to vice president? And what about the insider trading? What in the hell is all that about?" That final question made the entire room go silent for a second, before it exploded with even more ferocity. Insider trading? 3 financial reporters practically leaped forward. "Mr. Davenport, did you say insider trading? Is there an SEC investigation happening at Vanguard?" Davenport knew he'd made a mistake, but it was too late. He took a deep breath and turned to the reporters. "Since it's all coming out, I won't deny it. I just received the internal audit report yesterday. Marcus Vance executed trades using offshore accounts right before our major earnings reports were released. The total is estimated to be around $50 million. The evidence is undeniable." This time, even the junior staff in the back were completely shocked. People were on their feet, hands over their mouths, filming every second. Marcus sagged against the massive screen behind, as if all his bones had turned to liquid. His face wasn't just pale anymore, it was the colour of ash. "Catherine, the feds are here." Alex's calm voice whispered in my ear. I looked toward the ballroom entrance. 6 people in suits and tactical jackets were pushing their way inside. The letters FBI were emblazoned in bright yellow across their backs, and they were flanked by SFPD detectives in suits. As they walked in, the crowd just parted for them like the Red Sea. Every single camera in the room swung in their direction. The press was in a frenzy. This was easily shaping up to be the corporate scandal of the decade. The lead FBI agent, a man in his 40s with a square jaw, walked right up to the stage and pulled a warrant from his jacket. "Marcus Vance, you are under investigation for federal securities fraud, insider trading, and corporate embezzlement. You need to come with us." Before Marcus could even react, a detective was approaching Isabella. She was panicking, grabbing her purse and trying to bolt. "What are you doing? I didn't do anything." "Isabella Reed, you are being investigated as an accessory to wire fraud and corporate embezzlement. Please place your hands behind your back." I can't even begin to tell you what it felt like to have that enormous weight, the one that had been crushing me for years, finally lift. Every ounce of that weight had been placed there by Marcus. The lies, the betrayal, the gaslighting, the sheer contempt. Now, all of it had been converted into data, videos, and federal charges that were crashing down right on his head. The ballroom was a hurricane of shouting and camera flashes. I stood in the crowd for another moment. No one even saw me. Then, the journalists found me. "Mrs. Vance, did you gather this evidence? Are you planning to file for divorce?" "Mrs. Vance, what's your comment on your husband calling you a decoration?" One reporter shoved his mic at me. I tilted my head just enough to let my sapphire brooch catch the bright camera lights. I smiled. "I will answer all of your questions on my social media in 1 hour. For now, I have only one thing to say. Mr. Vance owes me an explanation, and he certainly owes every single one of you one too." The police began to clear a path. Marcus was being led out in handcuffs, looking completely catatonic. As he passed Isabella, he didn't give her a single glance. She tried to run toward him, screaming, "Marcus," but a detective pulled her back. They took her away in the opposite direction. She tripped over her own high heels and nearly fell flat on her face. No one even flinched to help her. People just recoiled, as if she were poisonous. I could hear her sobbing and screaming that it was all a big mistake, that she was innocent. No one answered her. I just stood there watching as they were both hauled away. Amanda had pushed through the crowd, and now she grabbed my hand. Her palms were cold and clammy, but her voice was vibrating with adrenaline. "Catherine, you did it. You really, actually did it." I didn't say a thing. There were no words for this feeling. With hundreds of people watching, I slowly raised my head and walked toward the exit, with Amanda clearing a path for me. Alex's voice came through my earpiece. "Mom, I'm out of the cafe. I'll meet you downstairs by the car." I nodded. The sapphire on my blazer glittered like a cold, distant star. Once I was out of the charity ballroom, I felt my hands shaking, not from fear, but from the roar of adrenaline finally crashing. I walked down the plush hotel hallway, my steps deliberate and strong. When the elevator arrived, a few guests who'd been drawn by the drama were inside. They saw me and went stiff, backing away. They didn't know my name, but they knew I was the woman at the center of the scandal. I didn't meet their eyes. I just watched my own reflection in the mirrored doors. My face was a mask of calm. No tears, no smile of triumph, just eyes that burned a little brighter. The doors slid shut, and I heard a woman whisper behind me. Was that the developer's wife? She got her own husband arrested by the feds, right in the middle of his big speech. Vicious. I leaned on the elevator wall and let a small laugh escape. My reflection smiled back at me. "You call that vicious? You have no idea what he put me through." The elevator dinged in the lobby, and I crossed the vast marble floor. Sunlight streamed through the entrance, turning the polished stone to gold. Leo was waiting just outside, holding a cup of tea. He looked totally calm, as if we hadn't just unleashed a Category 5 storm upstairs. "Earl Grey? Hot, right?" He handed me the cup. I took a sip. The warmth soothed my throat, and the reality finally hit me.
"It's over."
"Not exactly," Leo said, drinking his own coffee. The whole thing was recorded. The live stream had 3 separate cloud backups. Just before the agents moved in, I sent the full, unedited feed straight to the IRS whistleblower office. I bet a few federal agents are watching the whole thing over their lunch right now. I looked at him and saw the boy in the nice suit was gone. He had grown up overnight. "Let's go, Mom. Let's get you home." I held the cup tight as we walked out into the busy Miami street. The sun felt warm on my skin. People hurried past, lost in their own worlds. Nobody spared us a glance. We were just a mother and son who had weathered a hurricane, walking home as if we'd just left a movie. By that evening, the video from the gala was everywhere online. My friend Amanda sent me a dozen screenshots from social media. 4 of the top 10 trending topics were about Vance Properties, hashtag Vance Properties Fraud, hashtag Liam Vance Arrested, hashtag Elena Vance Revenge, and hashtag Vance Properties Stock Plummets. Pundits and online sleuths were all chiming in. Some called me a hero, calling it the comeback story of the year. Others said I was ruthless, that after 20 years of marriage, I should have kept our problems private. But the hottest topic of debate was the illegitimate child. Was Mason really his son? That question had been gnawing at me too. In the car on the way home, I asked Leo. He hesitated, then said he only had the birth certificate. He hadn't gotten a DNA sample yet, but he'd already hired a PI to get a strand of hair from Mason and rush it to the lab. The results were coming any day, and Leo was firm that we had to use them at the perfect time. We'd hold them for the moment they'd do the most damage. That moment arrived at the first divorce mediation meeting. The court summons arrived the morning after the gala. Liam, already out on bail, had filed for an emergency mediation. He wanted to force a settlement on our assets and custody before the criminal trial could even begin. My lawyer Mitchell sounded grave on the phone. Liam hired Thompson and Crow, the most vicious divorce firm in Miami. The word is he paid them a $2 million retainer. He's planning to drag you through the mud, Elena. Be ready. I know, I told him calmly. 2 days later, at 9 a.m., we met in a sterile conference room at the courthouse. When Liam walked in, I barely knew the man. After just 2 nights in a jail cell, his perfectly styled hair was a wreck. A heavy stubble shadowed his jaw, and deep, dark circles hung under his eyes. He looked like he'd aged a decade. He wore a wrinkled suit that seemed too big for his frame now. The invincible tycoon Liam Vance had vanished. All that was left was this broken shell of a man. Beside him was his lawyer, Thompson, looking immaculate in a tailored suit, carrying a fancy briefcase and radiating pure arrogance. As Liam sat, Thompson leaned over and whispered to him. Liam gave a slight nod, and then his eyes finally met mine. His gaze was a toxic mix of pure hatred and a pathetic sort of pleading. I didn't even blink. I held his stare until he was the one who had to look away. The mediator, a retired judge, started the meeting. Thompson spoke first, launching into a 15-minute tirade. His argument really boiled down to 2 points. First, that I had slandered Mr. Vance, causing him immense emotional pain and destroying his career, and he was reserving the right to sue me for it. Second, that my proposed division of assets was ludicrous and would leave his client completely penniless. "Leave him with nothing!" Thompson yelled, his outrage completely manufactured. Mr. Vance is the genius who built Vance Properties. He dedicated 20 years of his life to building an empire for his family. He deserves a fair share, not to be kicked to the curb without a single dollar to his name. He finished his little speech and sat down, looking incredibly smug. The room fell silent. All eyes were on me. My lawyer began to rise, but I put a hand on his arm. "I've got this." I stood, took a plain manila envelope off the table, walked to the centre and placed it down. "Your Honour, gentlemen, before we discuss assets, I have a document I'd like you all to see." Thompson scowled. "Miss Vance, can we please stick to the official schedule for this mediation?" "This is a DNA paternity test," I said, cutting him off. My voice was low but carried like a whip. "The test subjects are Liam Vance and the supposed illegitimate son, Mason. The probability of paternity is 0%. This boy has absolutely no biological relationship with Liam Vance." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. For 5 long seconds, nobody made a sound. Then Liam violently kicked his chair back and jumped to his feet, his eyes bulging. "What did you say? That's impossible. You're a liar." His lawyer was stunned, trying to grab Liam's arm, but Thompson's own face was a perfect mask of shock. The mediator picked up the report, flipped to the final summary page, and gave Liam a very peculiar look. He slid the document across the table toward Thompson. Thompson grabbed it, his eyes darting over the page. All the colour drained from his face. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He turned to Liam and whispered so low I almost missed it, but I could read his lips. "The test is legit, Liam." Liam just stood there, frozen, as if struck by lightning. The look on his face morphed from fury to utter confusion, and then to something I had never seen on him, a complete and total collapse. The woman he'd supported for six years, spent $40 million on, and destroyed our family for, had been playing him the entire time. I watched the man who was ready to destroy me just moments before. He used to look at me like I was a piece of decor in his penthouse. Now, he sank back into his chair, his face ashen, his mouth opening and closing, silently like a fish out of water. He couldn't even form a word. The mediator cleared his throat, trying to restore order. The court will of course verify this report. But in light of this new information, Mr. Vance, do you still wish to make claims for custody and child support? Liam was still mute. Thompson, all his bluster gone, answered for him. We withdraw those claims at this time. Mitchell saw his opening and pounced. He stood and slapped my list of divorce demands on the table. He turned the pages one by one, his voice calm and measured. Mr. Vance, my client sent her proposal last week. All properties go to Alina Vincents. Full custody of Leo goes to her. You will repay the $40 million you embezzled, plus penalties. If you agree to sign today, we will forego a full forensic audit of your other shell corporations. Mitchell paused, then pulled out 3 more thick, sealed folders from his briefcase and dropped them on the table with a loud thud. Thompson flinched. We have the wire transfers from your accounts in the Caymans and your shadow ledgers, Mitchell said. If we don't resolve this right now, these folders go straight to the feds. Silence. Liam just stared at the folders on the table. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Thompson, his lawyer, quickly scanned a file, then slammed it shut. Liam. He leaned in close. The truth is, we've got nothing. We're cooked. She knows way more than we ever imagined, especially with that paternity test. Everything Chloe was doing behind your back creates a massive legal nightmare for you. Taking this divorce to trial will only bury you with the feds. Liam swallowed a dry clicking sound. He turned his head slowly, so slowly, to look at me. His eyes were completely stripped of their usual fire and arrogance. There was only a cold, hollow void left. Elena, he whispered my name. I half expected him to scream, or maybe even to beg for forgiveness. But he just sat there for a long moment, and then he said, I'll sign it. When those 3 words came out of his mouth, I felt a tremor go through my whole body. It wasn't pity. It was a profound, bone-deep sense of relief. 20 years, and that was the only truth he'd ever really told me. Not I love you, not I'm sorry, just I'll sign it. The mediator asked his clerk to prepare the final agreement. My attorney, Mr. Grant, went over every single line. A paralegal handed Marcus a heavy, expensive pen. He just stared at the blank signature line on the last page for what felt like an eternity. The fluorescent lights in the conference room felt cold. At last, he signed. His hand was shaking. The end of his signature tore off into a sharp, broken line. As he walked past me, he stopped. He wouldn't look at me, but he whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. My mistake wasn't trusting her. It was destroying you. Then he left. I stood alone in the silence. I reached over and picked up the signed divorce papers. The ink on Marcus's signature was still wet. 15 years together, 12 of them married. From a tiny apartment to a real estate empire, from just us to a family. Our entire life together had been reduced to that one hollow confession. I took a deep breath and turned to my own signature page. Signing my name used to feel like I was just an accessory Mrs. Marcus Thorne. Today, I signed my real name, Isabella Rossi, clean, sharp and final. A new chapter, a new future for my son and me. On the day the divorce was finalized, the San Francisco weather was perfect. Sunlight poured through the tall courthouse windows, making the marble floors gleam. I walked out of the courtroom in a crisp white suit. Mr. Grant and his associates followed close behind me. My friend Ava linked her arm through mine. Her own eyes were puffy and red. The judge's decision had been swift and total. 1. The marriage between Isabella Rossi and Marcus Thorne is dissolved. 2. All marital property is awarded to me. 3. I get sole custody of our son Julian. 4. Marcus is ordered to repay the $25 million in embezzled marital funds. 5. 20% of Thorne Dynamics voting shares will be transferred directly to me. He has to complete the transfer within 7 business days. 6. Marcus's countersuit for libel was dismissed with prejudice. 7. And he has to pay all of my legal fees. As the judge read out every point, I just sat there, my posture perfect, without letting a single tear fall. Ava, however, was a total mess, sobbing quietly into a scarf behind me. When we walked out, she insisted they were tears of joy, not sadness. "Isabella Rossi, you owe me an enormous brunch," she mumbled through her sniffles. "This whole nightmare killed my appetite for weeks. I lost weight. You owe me carbs." I actually laughed. "It's a deal." As we exited the courthouse, we were hit by a tidal wave of reporters. Ever since the scandal went public, my face was all over the financial news. On social media, they were calling me the matriarch of Market Street. "Miss Rossi, with the judgment now finalised, do you have a statement? Isabella, is it true you're planning a full takeover of Thorn Dynamics?" I just lowered my sunglasses and gave the flashing cameras a thin smile. The court's decision is now a matter of public record. As for the company, all questions will be answered tomorrow, following the emergency board meeting. With that, I slipped into the back of a black car and drove away from the chaos. The next day, inside the main boardroom at Thorn Dynamics headquarters, the emergency board meeting was underway. The agenda was short, just one item: who would replace Marcus Thorn as the CEO? The tension in the room was so thick you could feel it. 10 directors sat around a polished oak table, led by the chairman, Mr. Days. 2 chairs at the table were empty. I sat by myself at the far end. In front of me were the legal documents transferring 20% of the voting shares into my name, as ordered by the court. I had come alone. Showing up with a legal team for a meeting like this just screams weakness. Mr. Davies tapped his pen on the table. "Gentlemen, Thorn Dynamics is a ship without a captain. Since Marcus's indictment, our stock has dropped 40% in 1 week. 3 of our biggest development partners have already backed out. Our primary lenders are demanding we name a new CEO immediately. If we don't have a new leader by Friday, they will trigger the default clauses and call in our loans." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room before it landed right on me. "Isabella Rossi now controls 20% of the company's shares, plus the 5% held in trust for her son, Julian. That gives them control of 25% of the vote, making them our largest shareholder. The company charter gives her the right to nominate a new chief executive." Mr. Peterson, a director known for his skepticism, cleared his throat and spoke up. "Miss Rossi, you are the controlling shareholder, and your rights are clear. But Thorn Dynamics is in a tailspin. The stock is crashing, partners are gone, it's a complete disaster. If you feel," he tried to be diplomatic, "that you lack the specific experience for this role, we could hire an outside crisis manager." The room went silent. A few directors took sips of coffee, their eyes darting towards me. I stood, walked to the head of the table, and gripped the back of the big leather CEO's chair, Marcus's chair. I pulled it out deliberately and took my seat. "Mr. Peterson, gentlemen." I made direct eye contact with every single person in that room. My voice was even and clear. "Thorn Dynamics was founded by my ex-husband, that's true, but it was built with my money. 15 years ago, when he was on the edge of total failure, I sold my family's inheritance to fund his very first project. 10 years ago, I used my late father's entire network to get the permits for our flagship tower. I never asked for a job title. I thought a marriage was supposed to be a partnership." The silence in the room was absolute. "But today, in this chair, I'm not asking for your pity. This company doesn't just need a CEO. It needs a foundation. The market needs to know we have a future, not just a past filled with scandal." I opened a folder and slid copies of a new restructuring plan across the table. It was the recovery strategy Julian and I had been working on for weeks. "First," I said, ticking off the points, "we will immediately terminate every contract connected to Marcus Thorn and Chloe. We'll launch a full forensic audit of all vendor payments from the last 3 years. Anything we find goes to the district attorney. Second, we pause all new speculative building projects. We refocus every dollar on our core properties, and we will have 2 of them fully leased within 90 days. Third, we establish an independent ethics committee run by a former federal prosecutor to completely rebuild our corporate governance. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table, and looked at every director. I have the legal right to sit in this chair. But today, I'm not asking you to vote for me as CEO. I'm asking you to vote on my plan to pull Thorn Dynamics out of this mess. Silence filled the boardroom. Then Mr. Davies raised his hand, then another director, and another. Finally, even Mr. Peterson slowly raised his hand, with a small, knowing smile. Miss Rossi, I'll be blunt. I was completely against you walking in here. But that plan is more decisive and, frankly, more intelligent than any crisis manager I've spoken to. You have my vote. When Mr. Davies announced the result, his voice was heavy with finality. Unanimous. Isabella Rossi is hereby appointed Chief Executive Officer of Thorn Dynamics, effective immediately. The applause started with just a few claps, then grew until it filled the entire room. I just sat in that CEO's chair, my own heartbeat steady and strong. After the meeting, I was the last one to leave the room. Stepping into the CEO's office on the top floor, I finally saw the incredible view of the San Francisco Bay. Marcus never let anyone else into his office. I'd only ever seen it once, peeking over his shoulder. Now, this view was mine. On the desks sat a framed picture of Marcus and Chloe in a boat. I picked it up, looked at her smiling face for a second, and then dropped it into the trash can. The heavy metal frame hit the bottom with a loud thud, like a final harsh end to a 15-year story. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Julian. "Mom!" "How did the board vote?" I replied, unanimous. "Your mom is the new CEO of Thorn Dynamics." He immediately sent a fire emoji, followed by another text. "The next hearing for Dad's federal case is scheduled for the 10th of next month. The prosecutor is confident the embezzlement charges will stick. His lawyer says, with the evidence we provided, he's looking at 5 to 8 years in federal prison, minimum." I stared at the text and felt nothing, not happiness, not revenge, just a deep quiet. Marcus would finally face the consequences of his choices, and my own life could actually begin. That night, I drove back to our penthouse in Pacific Heights, really just to pack my things. The apartment was legally mine now, but I couldn't stand being there. Too many memories, too many of his lies. I'd already tasked my assistant with finding a sleek new place in the city, something closer to the main office. When I walked in, Julian was on his laptop, his face glowing in the dark. The huge TV was on, with financial news anchors dissecting the major leadership shake-up at Thorn Dynamics. This just in, the board of Vance Architecture has unanimously appointed Clara Stone as its new president, officially launching the firm's new era of leadership. The new era. Alex didn't even bother looking up from his laptop, just smirked. "Mom, you're a corporate icon now. You can't leave the house without perfect hair. You know the paparazzi are waiting." I just laughed and messed up his hair. "You're impossible. Anyway, are you free this weekend? I want to go look at some new penthouses." He closed his laptop and stretched, pushing his glasses up. "No need. I already hacked the developer's server for that waterfront high-rise you liked. I've got all the floor plans right here. Building security, parking access, even the fiber internet speeds. My son checked it all. I flagged the 3 best corner apartments for you, so now you just have to pick a skyline. Is there anything you don't secretly look into? I wasn't sure if I should be proud or worried." "You've got a hacker's brain?" Leo just grinned, taking his glasses off to wipe them on his shirt. When he looked back, the evening light caught his face, making him seem older, more thoughtful. He was growing up so fast. "Mom, what's your plan now?" "After you save the firm, I mean." I walked to the window and opened the heavy drapes. The Dallas skyline was on fire with the sunset, all orange and gold. My plan is to save the firm, rebuild its name, and then hire a professional to run it. Once you graduate, the company's yours if you want it. If not, you can go build your own empire. And after that, I turned to face him, a genuine smile spreading across my face. I'm finally going to travel. Then I'll come back, restore that old farmhouse my grandparents left me, and plant a garden filled with nothing but roses. Leo stood up and joined me at the window. We watched the city lights start to twinkle. "Mom, You told me once the best thing you ever did was have me. I did. Why'd you bring that up? He held out his phone. On the screen was a new business registration. The company name was Vance Creative Solutions. The founders section listed both of our names. I have something to tell you too. He put his phone away, his face suddenly serious. His voice didn't waver. The best decision I ever made was that day in his office, the lawyer's office, when I told you to fight for it all, to not give up. The name echoed in my mind. My family name. No trace of Thorn anywhere near it. I pulled him into a hug, trying to stop the tears. He held me tight. Outside, the whole city seemed to glow. The city was alive, like it always is. And for the first time in so long, so was I.